going on, family?
Hey.
And welcome back to Loving in the Dark. This is episode number 6. And this is an exciting one. Not necessarily the subject matter exciting, but exciting from the aspect that Sam and I kind of transitioned from just the general talks about our journey, things that we experienced. And now we get into the topics and things that you all want to hear about, and just general topics and tidbits, different nuggets to help to build successful relationships, successful marriage, successful family. And so today's topic is actually stemming from one of our viewers, one of our subscribers, who was interested in hearing us talk about abuse, specifically verbal abuse.
But before you get into that, I just want to recap a little bit for those who may be joining us for the first time and starting with episode 6. We do advise that you go back to the very beginning and try to catch the beginning of our journey. But just to recap a little bit so that you don't have to watch all 5 episodes in one day, just to stay connected with number 6. Our testimony is that we were married for about 5 years, and we allowed the enemy to come in, me personally, and we ended up getting a divorce. And so we were divorced for a year, kind of. And then God did the miraculous and brought us back together and reunited our family together. And so we decided that it was our mission to tell others our testimony, to definitely make sure that God gets all the credit for all that he has done, but also to help others along the way, people that are married, thinking about divorce, people that have been divorced, or even if you're single and you're just in dating relationships. We are hoping that our message is getting to the right ones that can be healed through all of that. And so now that we have told our story, like Josh said, we're getting into more topics that have been requested. So feel free, at the end, we always say chime in and let us know what you're thinking. But make sure that if you have something pressing that you really want us to talk about, make sure that you're sending it to us, because we can easily come up with topics on our own, but we want to make sure that we are reaching those that need it the most. And so if there's something that you're dealing with or that you have experienced in your relationship, we want to know about it so that we can connect and grow together.
Absolutely. Thank you. See that teamwork there? See?
So now about abuse, which is not happy topics at all. And it's pretty hard to talk about for a lot of people, because they've experienced it on different levels. Specifically, we want to kind of hone in on emotional and mental abuse. But abuse is abuse, and it's wrong either way. And so, kick it off.
Yeah, and before I delve into that, you made me think about something. When it comes to relationships, whether they're marital relationships or just a dating relationship, something that's important to define is how you view your relationship. Do you view your relationship as, or your status as, oh, I'm just dating for fun, or I'm dating for courtship, I'm dating because my end result is marriage? Because one thing you got to take into consideration, and that's really what opens the door to a lot of this other stuff, like verbal abuse and things like that. Now, granted, these things absolutely happen in marriage, but my point is, if you're dating just to have fun, having fun, it's all fun and games, right? So it's hard for you to set an expectation for someone to not physically, verbally abuse you, for somebody to respect you as a potential spouse when you yourself aren't looking for them to be that person. If you're only dating for fun, then expect everything that comes with that. Expect the worst in all aspects, and just be conscious. I'm not the one. God is the only person who, is in the seat of judgment of saying, hey, look, this is not right for your life. This is right for your life. But what I am saying is, just be very intentional when you put yourself in what you call a relationship with a person, and set those rules. Hey, look, we're just friends. We just go to the movies every now and then, and that's it. So that number one, the person on the other end is not misinterpreting kind of what the platform is that you all are on. And then, number two, you can have your expectations met, because without setting those expectations, there's nothing for anybody else to meet except for their assumptions for what they think that you want.
Right. So just basically make them clear. Make those clear. Expectations clear on both ends, making sure that you're perceiving their expectations, understanding what they're expecting of you as well. That way that you don't come across so many misunderstandings and you feel one way and then they feel the other, and now you're left with a heartbreak or some other trauma related to that relationship that you shouldn't have even ever been feeling or aiming towards in the beginning. So making sure that those expectations are just plain out clear.
Yeah, because there are people out here which kind of opens maybe some people's not comfort zone, but where they don't take it as seriously, they take it lightly when somebody starts to abuse them verbally. Is a lot of people that are in these type of relationships, especially the ones that are as casual, as fun, as whatever, some of these people expect to be treated as if they're a spouse. I want to be treated like a husband, I want to be treated like a wife, and you don't do this for me and they don't do that for me. And that's why, that's really what it comes down to. Like, you're expecting this person to be in a position of some place that you never want to put them. I don't want her to be my wife. I never want him to be my husband. This is all fun, but I still want him to treat me well. I still want her to treat me well and take my feelings into consideration. Now, absolutely, we should do unto others as we expect them to do unto us. But verbal abuse, it's a big topic. That's the biggest thing with the verbal abuse. And just anything in general. When you're in a relationship with someone, it's easy for us to expect things from other people, but very few of us are actually willing to treat the person the same way that we want to be treated, or even treating that person better, because that's what God kind of calls us to do. That is the Christ-like way. That is God's kind of design for us. You do things well for others, regardless. If they're doing well to you. And that doesn't mean you're going over here bending over backwards, breaking your back while somebody's abusing you. That's not what that means. What that means is, like we mentioned in one of the other episodes, one of my frustrations that I've had before, where I'm doing things just generous for people, whether it's opening a door, just whatever. And then sometimes getting frustrated when, somebody doesn't say thank you, things, whatever. But it's like, you know what? God is the one who sees that, and he's the one who's going to provide the ultimate reward. So do those things regardless. So that's what I mean when I say do those things in relationships with people, to be kind to people, to treat people better than how you want to be treated. And eventually the reciprocation is going to come there. It might not always happen immediately.
I think that verbal and emotional abuse, mental abuse, I think that comes very easy for people. A lot of times you hear the word abuse and you instantly think some type of physical or sexual abuse has happened. But you can be very abusive with your words. And because not everyone thinks that way, or that's not something that's always on the front of, on the forefront of their thinking, it spills out and it comes naturally. And so until the damage is done, they don't realize, the damage that they have done to that person just by just simply by their words. You have to understand what it means to be emotionally abused or abusive in order to even catch yourself doing it. You have to know, like the Bible says, there's power in tongues, and there's a lot of power behind the things you say. And so you have to accept that emotional and verbal abuse is a thing first before you can even deal with yourself, because people say I'm not abusive. No one wants to be titled like an abuser, and they feel like just because they're not physically hurting you with their hands, or with objects, then they're not abusing you. And so for the person that is being abused, that's where communication, the tough communication, has to take place. Because if you notice that you're experiencing that, then you have to lay it out there as soon as it happens. Don't give that person time to continue building up on their abuse. Just go ahead and lay it out that this is what's happening. This is how you're making me feel. This is the hurt that you're doing to me, so that they have a clear understanding, and hopefully that triggers their mind to think, okay, well, maybe this is a form of abuse, and maybe I shouldn't be saying these things or doing things this way.
Definitely. And see, I know there's a connection there, because I was thinking power of life and death in the tongue, and then you said it. But absolutely. And a lot of that, the roots of that stem from many people's upbringing. You grow up in an environment, excuse me, whether both of your parents are there or whether there's one parent there, and you grow up in this environment that, the parent is talking to the children in a certain way, and the children just kind of expect it, like, okay, well, this is the norm. So when mom talks down to me and mom calls me stupid and yells at me or whatever out of frustration, it's like, okay, I expect this and I'm used to it. So now as I get older in my adult life, and then the person that I'm choosing to go through life with is talking the same way to me, it's like, this is kind of a faux comfort. It's like, this is the way my mom used to do. So without calling it out or thinking about it, you're basically subconsciously okay with this person's treatment because it's what you're used to. That doesn't make it okay. But also with growing up in those type of environments where, parents are talking to their children a certain type of way, it's like, now I feel that it's okay to talk to people this way. I feel that this is an effective communication tool because this is my upbringing. Well, then you meet somebody else with a different upbringing that maybe grew up in a more nurturing environment where, there's a bunch of affection. They say I love you often. They hug often. And now you're in this relationship with this person, but you grew up in a not so comforting environment. And now you're lashing out, and the simple turning away of this person's hug, the simple get out of my face, I can't stand you. And that person's taking it literally because they're not used to hearing these types of words from somebody that says I love you. And now the opposite person is sitting there, overanalyzing things before they do them. Anytime you say something to them, they're taking it to heart. Like me, like I'm a very literal person. And Sam has grown to know this part of me.
When he says that, y'all, it just all kinds of stuff just start going off. I'm like, yes, you are.
I'm so literal. Like, I mean, I've been that way pretty much all my life. So, I mean, if you, say, you make me sick, get out my face, like, I'm going to get out your face. And you know what I mean? At this point in my life, I've matured to the point where, I mean, there's not going to be any, I'm not going to own those emotions from it. But, I mean, if you're telling me that you don't want me in your life, then guess what? I can exit, trust what people tell you.
Yes. And so with that being said, that's one area that we struggled with in the beginning of our marriage, because as he was mentioning how your upbringing, so I was very guilty of that. I thought that it was just you scream at people to get your point across, and that's how you communicate. And that's because that's what I saw. I saw that growing up, and I thought that was the only way to get my point across, is to scream in order for you to hear me. Because if I just talk like this, then you're never going to understand what I'm really trying to say and how I really feel. So I have to scream at you in order to get my point across. And that was a hard thing for us in the beginning, because he would be like, "Why are you screaming?" And I'm like, "I'm not screaming," but literally I was. And it does. You hear that, and you're like, "Wait, I'm not screaming," but then your tone immediately changes down to a level that it's not screaming. And I'm like, I've been talking like this the whole time. It's so it's funny to talk about it now, but it is a true struggle when you're going through it. And so this makes me think about when you're in those initial stages, to talk about things that you experienced growing up. Like, what did your household look like? What did your family look like? So that the other person can be prepared for those moments when things do get out of line, and understand why they are happening, or where is that emotion stemming from, or that behavior stemming from. It also makes me think about a lot of times when you are experiencing abuse, and mental and verbal, any type of abuse really, but when we are the ones that are being abused, we own it. We take it, into feeling like, okay, what have I done? What did I do? There must be a reason why they are acting this way. I have had to say something. I've had to do something. But really, it's the other person. It's on them. They are experiencing something, whether it's insecurities or anger, hate, whatever. It's their actual problem. They're just demonstrating this behavior out on you, but it's not yours to own. It's theirs. And until they can realize that and heal from whatever they're suffering with, then their behavior won't change. Because you can change, you can do things differently, do things better, to hope that they stop their behavior or their abuse towards you. But until they heal within themselves, they're never going to change. They're never going to stop using abusive language, or even actions towards you. So,
yeah, and like Sam said, those startup conversations are essential. And one way to kind of gauge if a person is healed enough to even take on another relationship, we all want relationships. But specifically intimate relationships, romantic relationships, when you're committed to somebody, or you're saying, hey, let's get married, before anybody can get to those, like if you're having a conversation with someone that you're dating, interested in, and just honestly speaking, if that question comes up, well, how was it growing up for you? Well, I don't want to talk about it. That's a red flag. That's an indicator. You know what? I love you, but I don't know if we need to get this close at that point, at this current moment, because you're telling me that something from your past has hurt you so much that it's traumatized you that you don't want to talk about it. Now, once again, that doesn't mean don't interact with this person, but
it just shows you what you need to focus on. What you need to focus on,
because what you don't want to happen is, your relationship kind of skyrockets, and now all of a sudden you find yourself with a ring, married, and this person that you didn't know anything about their background, and they didn't want to talk about it, and you knew there might have been something there, but he just doesn't want to talk about it. It's a sore topic for her. That's just how they are. And now you're connected with this person, and all this stuff starts lashing out on you, and you don't understand where it comes from because you never seen this side of this person. Well, maybe you triggered something from their childhood, their past experiences that was never brought to light. So I challenge anybody, if you're starting a relationship with someone, ask those questions. And if that person is not willing to discuss that with you, that's an indicator that that's going to be a long road, not an impossible road, but a long road with getting that person to the point where you can communicate effectively to them. Because if they're not willing to open up with that small fragment, and that's a small fragment with effective communications, understanding, someone's background and how they communicate. But if you don't understand that piece, you say one word and, the words start. And then after the words start, then, that verbal abuse can turn into physical abuse. When you start to become so frustrated and irritated. You feel like you can't control your emotions. But when you're selecting your mate, the person that you want to go through life together with, that First Corinthians love that says love is patient, love is kind. Anybody that is habitually lashing. Now, granted, none of us are perfect. We're human. So we do things out of our emotions, but we're still in control of our emotions. Our emotions don't control us unless we let them. So if that person is early stages, right, even before marriage, person starts to talk to you in a certain way that's not comforting to you, that's not kind to you, you got to ask yourself a question. Do I see this person improving in this aspect of their personality, or is it, like you said, just who they are? And if that's just who you are, guess what? Hey, that's cool. You be you, but I'm going to be me over here, because I'm not going to be connected with a person that's not willing to acknowledge that they have an issue with communicating with people, especially with me. If you're saying you want to spend life with me, I'm taking that as you want to treat me as your equal. You're treating me how you want to be treated, because with verbal abuse, and I know, most of us have experiences, whether we're the ones delivering it or receiving it without even thinking about it, where, you better not be screaming at me. But then in a moment of anger, I turn around and I'm like, I'm giving back the exact same thing that I just said I'm uncomfortable with. But you have to take the other person's emotions into consideration when it comes to relationships, especially a marriage. Otherwise, you might as well be by yourself.
And if you are the one, because it has to be a lot of you, I just know it. If you are the one that's thinking, that's just who I am, that's all I know, that's who I am, then I challenge you to find out why. Because that was me for a very long time. That's just who I am. That's how I talk. So you got to deal with it. It was my way of thinking. And those were the things that I said. So if you are, listening to this and you're thinking, well, forget that. Like, they got to deal with it because that's just what I know to be true. I challenge you to really take a look at yourself, do a good self-reflection. And this is where the mental health and therapy can come into play again. We mentioned that a lot before in our previous episodes, but it's so important to know who you are, know why you do things, and heal from them, because once the damage is done, it's hard to go back and pick up those pieces. And so if you can do as much healing in yourself before you get into a marriage, the better. A lot of times that doesn't happen until you are married, because you don't even realize those things are a problem until you're up against it. But I definitely challenge you to do a good self-reflection and figure out why you're just that way. Don't just settle for yourself, not just for someone else, but just for yourself, because it's going to spill out and is going to affect all of your relationships with everyone, your family, your coworkers, not just your spouse, but your children. So figure out why you're that way, and let the healing take place.
Yeah, and one thing that I was thinking about while you were talking about, just being in that mind frame of that's just who I am, this is just how I am. Basically what you're saying, every time you articulate that, you're saying that forces outside of me are stronger than I am. My environment is stronger than I am. I'm controlled by the things that happen to me. Meanwhile, trying to exhibit that you are in control with your actions, with your words. It's contradicting. Either you're in control or you're not. The whole product of our environment. Personally, I'm a big advocate on the fact that, we can control how we act, how we behave. Now, granted, you might not be able to control your environment, especially if you're a child. But once you become an adult, and this has to be something that you decide as an individual. Sometimes it takes therapy to get to this point. and open your mind to understand that you need to break your mind from this mental prison that you've placed it in to thinking that you can't control your actions or behaviors. Because anytime that you're saying that your mind or something else forced you to do something, that's when we need to talk to somebody. We need to talk to a therapist. We need to talk to a psychiatrist, because we're basically saying that something outside of my person is inhibiting me to do something that I don't necessarily agree with.
Maybe Dean need a therapist, because she be like, my mind told me to do it.
My brain
told me to turn around in this chair.
But seriously, to have the willingness to change, and if you're in a relationship with somebody that at least has that willingness to change, then you have to, have a realistic conversation with yourself and with that person to determine how far you're willing to go, to give this person the time to make adjustments for the relationship. If this person is someone who you're choosing to go through life together, and I say that, very intentionally, the person that you choose to go through life with, because as we talked about before, with love, it's not some magic fairy tale thing that just snaps and happens and, oh, I love this person, I don't know where it came from, but I can't control it. Lust happens that way. But when it comes with love, there's work that's required with love, and love is absolutely, it's a choice. It's a choice to continue to love somebody. It's a choice to not continue to love someone. So in doing so, you have to set that standard of, all right, look, we're having this open, honest conversation. This is how you're trying to communicate with me, and I don't feel that it's healthy. It does this to me when you talk to me this way. It makes me feel like I'm in a corner. It makes me feel like you don't have my best interest. It feels like, we're not going through life together. It feels like you're talking to me like I'm a child and you're my parents. And to have that conversation with that person and be like, hey, mentally I'm setting, 3 months down the line. If I don't see any improvement at all, then guess what? You are absolutely justified to say, you know what, I don't think this is working out for us. And we're talking pre-marriage.
Yes.
We're talking pre-marriage.
You cannot be getting divorced saying this ain't gonna work just over some sad emotional abuse.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You have to work through those things. And I know our society makes it so easy for us to get divorced, and, like in our state, North Carolina, you pretty much pay $250 whatever dollars and sign some papers, and that's it. Some other states might be a little harsher with those rules, but you have to be able to talk these things out before you get to the point of marriage, because by the time you're deciding to be married, you need to be 100% confident of saying, listen, when I say for better or worse, it's not some cute quote that I'm just saying because of tradition. It's something that I'm telling you, hey, look, I'm here with you, but I can say it confidently because we've had those conversations. We've talked. I know how to communicate with you. You know how to communicate with me. And that doesn't mean we're experts in the matter, but that means we've had that open dialogue, that honest conversation. So I know what your expectations are. You know what mine are. Some people set the cap at, well, how many kids do you want? Do you want kids? I want kids. Do you want pets? You want dogs? How many dogs do you want? What kind of dog do you want? What color dog do you want? And it stays very elementary with, oh, we talk all the time, but do you really? Are you talking things that don't really matter? Or are you getting into the depths of things? Because if you're, your spouse is supposed to be, your best friend, one of your best friends, and, to where you can be comfortable to tell them, anything, unless you're hiding something, but, to tell them anything about what's going on in your life. Hey, babe, my coworkers, they, whatever it is. It sounds silly, but it's so true. Because if you're not talking to your spouse, then guess what's going to happen? You're going to be talking to somebody else. And then that talking to somebody else matched with the verbal abuse of your mate turns into distractions. And then your distractions turns into, potential infidelity. And now you.
And so that's the door that the lack of communication, the enemy recognizes. And that's the door that he will use to get in. And so you can not have that door cracked even a little bit. That door has to be completely shut. And so if you're the ones married and you're like, I'm constantly suffering through my spouse's abuse, then what can I do? We shout out communicate like it's nothing, like it's just water spewing over. And we do realize that it's not that easy, but you have to start somewhere. And starting somewhere can just simply mean mention a couple little things over dinner, until you can build up to a good, effective way to communicate. But you have to start somewhere. You cannot continue. It's not healthy to continue in the relationship, constantly suffering, and then you can't expect the other person to do anything differently if you never communicated with them. So it's going to be a challenge to learn how to communicate, especially when you've been married 10, 20, 30 years, and you've only communicated one way. You have to just start somewhere, because like was just said, you can't just give up and say, okay, well, this ain't working out, I think we should be, get talking divorce, because that's definitely not the way to go. But something that just came to mind as a tip could be to write it down, like in your personal free time. Write down the things that you feel like that you're struggling with, when it comes to that relationship or specific abuse. Write down ways that you felt abused, because when you do come together to communicate, you want to be able to have good points to reference. You don't want to say, well, every time you do this. No, this specific time this happened, you said these words, and this is what hurt me. Get down to the very specific thing. So not making the list of all the pros and cons, things I like about you, things I don't, but really getting down to the nitty gritty of what's affecting you, and allowing that person to figure out, or see for themselves, okay, yes, this is an area that I struggle with.
Yeah, and I'll say this piece, just kind of expounding on what you mentioned. With journaling, you have to determine what is a battle that you're going to pick, what's a battle that is not worth picking, meaning it's not something that is hurting you, it's not something that's putting you in a place where you feel that you are being impaired physically, mentally, whatever. But you don't want to wait way down the line and bring up these things like, hey, do you remember on March the 3rd, 2:00 when you said these things to me? Write them down so that you can see, how it made you feel. You can analyze how you're going to convey to this person that it bothered you, and then bring it to their attention, even later that day. But at that point, you're either not angry that this person has treated you that way, or, maybe you've built up a little more confidence to be able to articulate it effectively to that person. Because if you bring it up down the line, it's just going to make things worse, because now it's like, oh, you're attacking me, like you're really keeping track of, when that's not the intent. But one thing to note, any verbal abuse is bad, it's negative, but it really becomes to a toxic, and this is how you know it's toxic, when you feel that I can't articulate anything to my spouse out of fear, even if it hasn't turned to physical yet. That's the point when you need to seek assistance. Even if you start seeking it for yourself, if your spouse is not, going to a psychologist, psychiatrist, then you start that for yourself, because what's going to happen is, and match with prayer. Now, granted, listen, we're keeping this real. The easy thing is for people to say, oh, well, just pray about it and pray about it. But guess what? God gives us common sense as well, and he gives us resources, and he uses those resources to speak through them, whether it be a doctor, whether it be a close friend with godly counsel. So we're not going to sit here on this platform and just tell you to pray about it, because God gives us more. He gives us more logic than that. So, with all that said,
pray first.
Pray first.
And then.
Right, because then you want God to guide you to the right
Yes.
resource as well. You don't want to just go out here haphazardly and just pick somebody. You want to make sure that He's placing somebody into your life. But what's going to happen with you as you're praying about it and as you're seeking, you're talking to a therapist about it, you're going to, kind of open up the envelope of your past to help to see, why am I receiving these words like this? Why are these words impacting me so much, to where you can build up the confidence that now becomes a part of your personality of, guess what? You said these things to me, and either A, they don't hurt me at all or as much anymore. B, maybe I was overanalyzing or overreacting about the whole situation. Or 3, no, I'm not crazy. You got some stuff going on, and let's get this straight. Not from an attacking aspect, but from a loving aspect, because, this is what I've come to realize. I've talked to this therapist, and if you say the person start rolling their eyes, their mind is already gone. They're not trying to do better. They're not trying to improve. But either way, you continue to do what's best for your mental health. And, whether that other person makes a decision to seek therapy on their own and change, naturally, anybody that wants to do better, when they see and they're connected to somebody else that's doing better, they're going to want to do better. It may take months, it may take years, but, those good seeds that you're planting, and if you're yoked to this person, you're married to this person, unless they're just, completely selfish, and like I said, they're unwilling to change or see what flaws they might have in themselves, that person has already decided that, hey, you know what? There's no changing for me. But yeah, as adults, we have to own, as humans, period, but especially as adults, we have to own when we're being negative to somebody, when we're not being kind to someone, we're being mean to someone. We have to understand that it's not okay for us to expect for other people to treat us better than we're treating them. I want you to greet me when I walk in the door, but I never greet you when you walk in the door. Whether that's something that you just like to receive for love, or whether it's something you like to do for love, always give out that same energy that you want in return. Because when you're lashing out in anger all the time, and that person brings back the anger to you, you kind of brought that on yourself. Power of life and death in the tongue. What you speak out is what's going to come into your life. So if all you're ever talking is negative, and, your mate is supposed to be the person right next to you, to literally go through life together, we're enhancing each other. We're building up each other. My job is not to tear down Sam, or Sam's to tear down mine. So even with dreams and aspirations and goals and things that you have, I'm not going to laugh off anything that, that Sam brings to me that's a goal of hers, because that's another form of verbal abuse. Sam's like, hey, you know what? I think I want to start creating some things. I want to personalize some, tumblers and shirts and anything that people want. I want to customize. She does that, by the way. Plug. I'm not gonna, turn like, girl, whatever. That's stupid, man. You don't need to do that. Because even saying that, I'm like, I'm not verbally abusive. Yeah, it is. Because you don't know what level of impact that does in her mind of saying, well, yeah, if my husband doesn't think I should be doing this, thinks it's stupid, maybe everybody else thinks it's stupid too. And you can laugh at all you want and not take it as seriously, but it's the truth. But, that simple thing that I've said to her, now her dream is completely diverted when God is looking at me to speak life into, her dreams and to help her, even if I'm not there helping her physically with it, if I'm not helping her financially with it, talking her up and helping her, with helping her to fulfill what she feels to be her purpose, what she feels that God is telling her that she needs to do. Verbal abuse comes in, so many shapes and sizes, and it's not just always somebody pointing a finger and talking down to you. So be very particular with your words that you release out your mouth, especially to somebody that you're in a relationship with your mate. And if you find yourself allowing yourself to start talking negatively, to call your spouse names that you wouldn't want to be called, you really need to check yourself. And you need to say, hey, why have I gotten to this place of comfortability where I'm okay with calling my wife out her name, or my husband, calling my husband out his name, whichever. Because you've already allowed the enemy to come in at that point. And it's only a matter of time before that turns into a major contentious environment where one of you may become physical, and leading up to and ending in potential demise. Something you never know, whether it's stress that kills a person or somebody physically trying to kill somebody. You don't want it to get to that point. So never think or take lightly any verbal abuse. Never downplay verbal abuse because the person is telling you, oh, I'm not verbally abusing you, or because somebody else is telling you it's not verbally abusing you. If you're taking something to heart in a negative way that somebody's saying to you, it can potentially be verbal abuse. But that's where you kind of craft and, make those lists, like Sam said, talk to a therapist and, kind of visit some of those scenarios that you're dealing with to say, hey, what do you think about that? How do you view this? To see, you might be overreacting on this one, or no, you need a healthy situation. This isn't a healthy situation. Let's help you get through this. Let's help you work past this.
Good. That's good right there.
Felt like I was kind of rambling a little bit there, but definitely, this topic is one that's it's not necessarily easy to talk about. It's not easy to discuss with people, especially with people that we're in relationships with, and letting them know that something is making us feel uncomfortable. But it's better to bring those conversations to light, before marriage if you can, so that you can work on them. Because I always tell people, if you're in a relationship with somebody, things don't often get better with marriage. Meaning, if we're not communicating now, chances are it's not going to get better with marriage. If we're not helping each other now, chances are it's not going to get better with marriage. It can go from like the greatest in the world to I got a great marriage. But, I don't know the percentages on it, but I can almost guarantee it, that you rarely or almost never see anybody saying, I was in an abusive relationship, or we never talked or communicated, and then we got married and everything's just, it's fine. It's better than it's ever been before because we got married. That just doesn't happen.
And that's because you have to be two emotionally whole individuals before you even come together. Yeah. So if you're not whole already, bringing it together is not going to make a whole. It's still going to be broken. So you have to be 100 yourself before you try to become one.
Or at least 98.
98.9999.
98.6. That's temperature. I'm joking, but definitely with this topic, if you're looking for resources, whether it's therapists, Sam and I are connected with some great people in our circle, networks, friends. So if you're seeking a therapist with some assistance finding one, reach out to us and we'll direct you in the right path. And definitely keep those topics coming, because this topic was driven from one of our viewers, one of our subscribers. So I definitely appreciate that. And so any questions, comments, concerns, prayer requests that you may have, make sure you send us an email at thosegriers@gmail.com. And
make sure you like, comment, share, and y'all know the rest. Subscribe.
You gotta subscribe. If you don't subscribe, you won't know we posted anything. Unless you're checking our page every day, which I don't think you are. But seriously though, we appreciate your support, and we're gonna continue this. We're gonna continue this going until God tells us otherwise. So thank you, and you have a great day, and peace.